So here's a little truth that one should accept even before starting with the spiritual search for liberation. And that truth is that you cannot change yourself. You have to understand that this self that's constantly looking for pleasure and trying to avoid pain and ultimately trying to find ultimate liberation, that self has its very own nature, and it's limited. It's like fire. Fire is limited. The only thing the fire can do is put things into flames. It can burn, it can heat up, but it can never be like water. It can never blow itself out. And so is also the self. It is only capable of distorting. So it can never become still by its own methods. So if the self that is looking for a method to become quiet is doing the method, then by doing the method it can only distort itself and strengthen itself. You see, it's like a self there, and the self wants to become no self. And so in order to become no self, it's doing a method, and the self is doing a method. The quality of the self is in the method. So by doing the method is strengthening the same old self. That's why people are meditating for decades, trying to attain enlightenment and inner peace, but all they ever experience is frustration and an illusory sense of progress. So here's something that one really should accept. One is blessed if they can accept this truth before even starting the spiritual search. It's just to realize, to accept that you cannot change yourself. It's like a fire that wants to blow itself out. What should this fire do? If it's doing anything at all, then it will only strengthen itself, because it's putting fire into fire, trying to become non-fire. So all the fire can do is observe itself without doing anything. Observe itself as it burns, and just witness how the strength of the fire becomes less and less until it's just gone. And that's all the self can do. So every method that you're using in order to become peaceful is just repressing the fact that there is chaos inside of you. So let's say if you wouldn't do anything at all, and you're just sitting there, and there is a lot of chaos going on inside of you, a lot of negative emotions, a lot of negative thinking, and it feels unpleasant. So it is very natural for the ego, because that's what it's doing. It's just in the nature of the ego to avoid pain and seek for pleasure. So what the ego is doing, it's looking for a method. For example, from Eckhart Tolle, and Eckhart Tolle is saying just become aware of the present moment. So you're basically focusing on the present moment, because when you're only aware of the present moment, then you're basically repressing thoughts that would naturally come up, that want to come up if you wouldn't use your willpower to become aware of the present moment. So there are thoughts that would arise, but there is willpower standing in between you and your thoughts, and this willpower says, I'm trying to be aware of the present moment. And this willpower is actually also just a movement of thought. That's what I think a lot of people get wrong. When Eckhart Tolle, for example, is saying that you should become aware of the present moment, it doesn't mean that you should just ignore your thoughts and your feelings and just be aware of this present moment. Being aware of the present moment without being distracted by thoughts is something that naturally happens when you have naturally surpassed your thinking. But it's not something you do through willpower. So the first thing that you do is, when you are an individual who is experiencing a lot of emotional turmoil and a lot of thinking that causes suffering, then that activity is the self, the very self that is trying to make this activity go silent. So the self that is constantly chattering is trying to become still, but as it's doing a method to make it still, it has to chatter more, because that's the only thing that it can do. So by trying to become, it has a good intention, it's trying to become silent, but doing a method to make it go silent is more chattering. So what can you do? Allow the self to chatter and just be with it. Don't try to change it. It takes a lot of energy and power to chatter. And as you're not resisting it, it loses its power, and then it gains some power back, and then you still watch it, you don't interfere. And then at some point, it's just natural silence. Not a kind of silence that comes about through a method or a technique. Because awakening is something that you discover. Therefore, it must be something natural. And therefore, if it's natural, it must be something that cannot be attained through your own doing, through your own works. Because if awakening comes about through your own doing, then it must mean that this awakening isn't natural. Awakening is the most natural thing there is. That's why it can only occur when you're not doing anything about it. On the contrary, you're not doing anything. You're just observing yourself as you are. The self, the ego self, you're observing that self as it is, as it's chattering. Trying to get rid of that chattering is more chattering, so you don't interfere, and ultimately will go silent. And in that silence, the sense of separation totally fades away. Actually, the sense of separation is already gone as soon as you are allowing the chattering to be, but you're not interfering with it. Because there is no thinker that is separate from the thinking. It's like when the fire is trying to blow itself out, the one that feels like I'm firing is actually just the fire. And the one that's firing, the little ego in the fire that thinks that I'm the cause of the fire, thinks it has the power to blow itself out. But that's a complete illusion. So if you don't put in any effort and you're just sitting down or laying down or just being, what happens then? Don't you have a lot of thoughts? Don't you have a lot of feelings? If you don't, that's amazing. Because that's what people are looking for. If you're naturally sitting down and naturally it's just nothing there and there's total peace and silence, that's it. But and I think that's what happens to most people, if you're sitting down and you're not putting in any effort to change yourself, and what naturally arises is a lot of thinking, a lot of feeling, then that's how you are right now, and stay as you are right now. Don't find something, don't try to figure something out to change it how it is. But simply watch yourself as you are naturally. Watch the thoughts, watch the feelings. Don't change them. And as I said, it's a natural impulse of the ego to say, It doesn't feel pleasant, therefore I must find some kind of method to change it. It's a survival mechanism. So in trying to change it, you run to a teacher that tells you, here's a method. That's how you can quieten your mind. And then he tells you, just become aware of your breath. Which is, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. It can be a good practice to get a sense of stability in yourself. But it won't lead to the ultimate sense of fulfillment. So the ego runs to a teacher. The teacher says you can focus on the breath, and then the same ego was focusing on the breath and hoping that one day, when I have focused on the breath for long enough, then suddenly there will be a miracle. And then I will be free. But what you're actually doing is you're just suppressing the fact that naturally, if you wouldn't put in any effort, you would suffer. There would be a lot of thoughts. The very act of focusing on the breath is the suppression of what would naturally be here. Allow the thing that would naturally arise to arise. If it's here, simply watch it. If it's not here, simply watch the not here. And as you're just in a relaxed state, in a relaxed awareness, looking at everything that happens in the self, in this mechanism of the ego, the feeling, the thinking, the activity, the restlessness, you're just watching it, you don't try to change it. At some point it will just settle down naturally. And it feels like the neurons are becoming free. They release the information that they have been carrying all the time. And your neurons start to become like mirrors. So everything that you experience in this immediate moment is just mirrored in yourself, in the brain. So as you are experiencing something in real time, right now, not recalling, not something that you take out of your memories, but the thing that you are, the very moment that you're experiencing right now, you become that moment. Because there's no past stored in your neurons. Neurons are completely free. Because the fire has been blown out. So as you're experiencing something, you don't feel that you're someone experiencing this, but you, just like a child. That's something that a lot of children, or I would even say every child, has experienced. They just forgot. As they grew up, they forgot that this happened. But when you're experiencing this again, you'll recall that actually that's something that you had very often as a child, that as you're looking at a sunset, you were able to actually experience it with all of your 5 senses. You can taste the sunset. It's just your senses become so sensitive. Not in a way that pain becomes more painful, but there's beauty in your experience. It feels alive. There's no past that sticks on it. But you cannot change yourself. Cannot make yourself become like that. You can only watch yourself as you are right now until this engine of the self becomes weaker and weaker and loses its power. It doesn't get fueled. And then it becomes silent. Then it's dead. And then see what remains. And that's the change that you're looking for. That the self cannot bring about. But it can only come about when the self loses its power.